So this was a thing that happened. Hellboy the Crooked Man. I remember when the first promotional images were released. Honestly, not that long ago, but I don't remember exactly when, and pretty much everybody pointed out that the character of Hellboy looked like he was straight out of a fan film. And the quality of the image kinda supported that, as it was obvious that this movie was made on an extremely low budget. And I will preface this, I haven't seen the original Hellboy movies in years. I remember liking them fine, but I just haven't seen them in a long time. I don't remember much about them. I did see the David Harbour reboot that came out in 2019. I saw it after it hit streaming, not longer after its very underwhelming theatrical release. And it was pretty bad. Again, I don't remember much about it, but I remember it being pretty awful. And now we have this, and pretty much every fear I had from this film, it looking like a fan film, basically looking and feeling like a fan film, pretty much what I got. Now, I will say this isn't quite as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it's still really bad. And I'll give you the biggest problem right off the bat, and that's that this movie is fucking boring. And not just the fact that there's a distinct lack of action in this movie that all the other three movies had, but not only is the action that we do get not very interesting and not very exciting, it's just a dull story. Now, I will say, I looked over the synopsis of the comic that this is directly based on, and it's mostly accurate to the comic. It makes a couple of changes, and there's one kind of big one at the end that I'm assuming was changed for budgetary constraints, but I'll get into that in a second as to why that's kind of stupid, because we'll get there. The makeup on Hellboy looks okay. Again, if this were a fan film, it would look phenomenal. Even on a streaming movie, though, this looks weird. It doesn't look right. Maybe I'm just used to the other guys who played him, who were a lot bigger and more muscular, but I don't know, something about it just looks off. And I will say most of the acting is not great. None of it's particularly atrocious, except for one. There's like one witch who the first time shows up about 25 minutes in on a horse. Her acting is insufferably over the top. And I do have to point out that when that chick showed up on screen and started acting, a couple of people walked out of the theater and never returned. I'm dead serious. That's not a joke. I didn't make that up for laughs. That literally happened. As soon as she started acting too, it was like a couple of people, like in one of the rows up in front, got up, walked out, and never came back. So that kind of tells you all you need to know. So I did say I was going to get into that change at the end, why I think it being a budgetary constraint is stupid. Because what happens at the end is that there's the person who owns the mansion that they go inspect, in the comics he shows up as his demonic form, some kind of crab creature. But he doesn't show up as a crab creature, he kind of just looks like the Crooked Man. He just looks like a really messed up dude. Like, with messed up teeth, messed up skin, the basics you get for some kind of demon. So, and again, I would chalk that up to budgetary constraints, but at the beginning of the film, they added in a fight with a giant CGI spider. By the way, the CGI in this is some of the worst you'll ever see out of this year. But they added that scene in for absolutely no reason. It was only used as a plot convenience to get them to this little village that's in the Appalachia, I think it's near the Appalachian Mountains. But that's the only reason that scene was added, and it wasn't a very good fight either, and again, the CGI was hideous. And there's more crappy CGI later, like when he has to fight a CGI snake. I will say him just crushing it with his iron fist, or whatever the fuck they call it, him just crushing the head, that's pretty cool. Although I hate when movies do the thing where the blood splatter or the gut splatter from when the snake's head explodes gets on the camera. God, I hate that. It's not a clever trick. It's not... All it does is kill the immersion of the movie and make me remember, oh yeah, there's a camera pointing at... I'm not actually watching anything. Or I'm not watching... You know what I mean. It's hard to explain. It's like, I'm not watching people in the scenario. I'm watching actors in front of a camera. That's all that does. And I hate when movies do that. So yeah, I already, but again, that spider, and again, that spider doesn't show up again until the very end, and it comes out of nowhere by the end and doesn't do anything. They just capture it again. And while this is happening, while Hellboy and, Tom, while they're inspecting the mansion, the place where the spider is found is with his partner, Billy Joe Song, who is not from the comics and was, or at least not in this comic, as she is a character from the comics. She was added to this movie and could have been cut because she is doing something with a blind pastor who is from the comic, who shows up earlier. She and him go through some like demonic tunnel or something, and it's just there to pad out the running time. So my biggest problem with this movie, other than it being boring, is the fact that this movie is shot and edited so poorly. There are so many scenes where I cannot see a damn thing. There are so many... Hell, there's even a couple times, especially during the final fight, where it'll be like completely pitch dark and I can't see anything. The shaky cam was obnoxious. It was clear as day. This guy had no idea how to hold the camera still. A lot of the shots were in stupid places. There were some Dutch angles that had no reason to be there. The scenes are edited so sloppy. I can't see anything in between the cuts. And apparently, the people who made this took a cue from Percy Jackson and the Olympians, where every scene just cuts to black. And it's even more egregious on Percy Jackson, because I'm pretty sure it was every scene cut to black. Do they not know that other transitions exist? Because there are many, many other ways you can transition to scenes other than just cutting to black. And, yeah. The music's pretty bad. It doesn't match what's on screen. And the giant musical cue that hits during the final title card, it was ear-bleedingly obnoxious. And, okay, so I guess I should mention the main plot of this, is that they're in this village and somebody... Oh my god, it's hard to explain what the main plot, just the main plot without going over every single detail, because this movie barely had a plot. So I guess this guy, Tom, he's looking for his now deceased father, who was turned into the horse I mentioned earlier, and is now dead. So he goes up to this mansion that's run by the Crooked Man, who is essentially the devil of this town, and they don't shy away from that, they straight up call him that. And apparently, as a kid, this guy made a deal with the devil, so now he has this lucky bone that kept him alive during World War II or something. And it keeps him... And this does come into play later, believe it or not, when they get to this church run by Reverend Watts, is that his name? And they actually do use it to fight off the witches that are invading the house. Although these witches look and act a lot more like zombies than they do witches, but whatever. And they actually, the way they defeat them is they use the bone, infusing the bone with the Holy Spirit, burning a cross onto a shovel, and Hellboy just hits the Crooked Man with that shovel, killing him. That's essentially the climax of the movie. That's the subtitle of the movie, and he's taken out with 30 minutes left of the film. I thought when he killed him, very anticlimactically, I thought the movie was wrapping up, but we were only an hour of the way through. Because again, the rest of the movie just kind of exists. I legitimately don't understand what the last half hour added to the story. I know it's from the comics, but that doesn't mean it needs to be in the film. They should have cut it. I think they should have cut this down. This should have been a short film, probably. Because there's not enough material from this comic to stretch this movie out to an hour and a half. That's probably why the spider was added to the beginning of the film, to pad out the running time. And it's why this other climax with Bobby Joe and Reverend Watts was added to the climax so they could pad the movie out another 10 minutes or so. And I think this was a really stupid idea. I think if you wanted to make I know they wanted to make a low-stakes Hellboy movie so that they didn't have to spend an absorbent amount of money on this. But, and especially it doesn't help that this thing is getting a very limited release. I don't know how many people in America are actually going to be able to see this movie unless you pirate it. But, because you can pirate, because nowadays piracy is apparently one of the easiest things to do. So, whatever. But either way, even if you can see this movie, I don't recommend it. This thing is incredibly boring. There's nothing really... If you're a Hellboy fan, if you really like the comic, it's basically like the Killing Joke movie, just slightly less shitty than that movie. Because that movie, the first 30 minutes of that were atrocious, and even when it got to the adaptation portion, it was still kind of boring, and the animation was really stilted and uninteresting. Everything about this movie is stilted and uninteresting. The acting isn't very good. Again, I don't think any of it's quite atrocious, but none of it's any good. I'd say Jack Kesey, however you say his name, who plays Hellboy, he's pretty one note, but he's alright. I think both Perlman and Harbour did way better with this role. I'd honestly like to see Harbour take another shot at this character, because the movie he was in may have sucked, but he was one of the few things in that movie that didn't suck complete ass. The CGI is atrocious, the action is terrible, the story is incredibly boring and uninteresting. There's an insane amount of padding for as short of a movie as this is. And that all leads to me, unfortunately, having to give this movie an F. I really didn't want to. I wanted to try to be fair to this movie, because it is a very low-budget film, but low budget isn't an excuse for low effort. So, that's all I got for Hellboy the Crooked Man, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.